So you've been hearing about this nasty stomach flu going around, right? Seems like norovirus is everywhere these days. We're going to take a deep dive into what's really going on with this season's outbreaks, going way beyond those alarming headlines you've seen. We've got a fascinating mix of sources for you today. Official reports from the Minnesota Department of Health and the CDC, some news articles from Al Jazeera, The Independent, and AP News, even some advice from the Vermont Department of Health on managing outbreaks. By the end of this, you'll not only understand what norovirus is, but also why this season seems so much worse, and most importantly, what you can do to avoid getting sick.
It's interesting how the media often calls norovirus the stomach flu, which can be misleading.
Right. It's important to clear up that confusion right away. Can you break down exactly what norovirus is and why it's different from the flu?
Absolutely. Norovirus is actually a family of viruses, and it's the leading cause of gastroenteritis. That's the medical term for inflammation of the stomach and intestines. This inflammation leads to those classic symptoms we associate with the stomach flu: vomiting, diarrhea, stomach cramps. Some folks might also experience low-grade fever, chills, headache, and muscle aches. While these symptoms are similar to influenza, they're caused by a completely different type of virus.
And what's really alarming is just how contagious this virus is. One of the articles mentioned it only takes about 10 viral particles to make you sick, and it can survive on surfaces for days. I mean, we've all been diligently using hand sanitizer, but is that enough?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, hand sanitizer isn't as effective against norovirus as good old-fashioned soap and water. You see, norovirus is incredibly hardy. That 20-second hand wash everyone's been talking about, it's absolutely essential here. The CDC estimates that norovirus causes a staggering 19 to 21 million illnesses each year in the U.S. alone, which underscores just how easily it spreads.
Wow, 19 to 21 million cases. That's a huge number. It really puts the scope of this out into perspective. But I guess it makes sense considering how resilient the virus is and how easily it spreads.
While that number is concerning, it's important to remember that most cases are mild and tend to resolve within a few days. However, young children, the elderly, and people with weakened immune systems are at higher risk for complications, mainly due to dehydration.
That makes sense. Now, we've all seen the news about this year's norovirus surge. What exactly is making this season so much worse than usual? Is it just the usual seasonal pattern, or is there something more going on?
You're right to question that, because this isn't just a typical seasonal uptick. The CDC data clearly shows that outbreaks were significantly higher in early December compared to previous years, which is quite unusual. One factor that's likely contributing to this surge is the emergence of a new norovirus strain called GII.176.
New strain. That's particularly interesting, especially considering how viruses evolve and why we need updated vaccines. It's a reminder that the world of viruses is constantly changing, and our defenses need to keep up.
Exactly. This new strain seems to be more easily transmitted, and because it's new, there's less immunity in the population, meaning more people are susceptible to getting sick. It's like the virus is always one step ahead.
It really highlights why ongoing research and surveillance are so crucial in staying ahead of these evolving threats. Speaking of places where norovirus seems to thrive, cruise ships often make headlines. We've all heard the term cruise ship virus, but is that just media hype, or is there truth to that?
Well, there's some truth to it. Norovirus is, in fact, the most frequent cause of diarrhea outbreaks on cruise ships, accounting for over 90% of cases. The close quarters, shared buffets, and those ubiquitous high-touch surfaces create an ideal environment for the virus to spread rapidly.
It's easy to imagine how quickly an outbreak could sweep through a cruise ship given those conditions. It's like a floating petri dish.
That's a very vivid way to put it. And it's not entirely inaccurate, but it's crucial to remember that while cruise ships provide a dramatic setting for norovirus outbreaks, they actually only represent a tiny fraction, about 1%. Of total cases.
So the perception that it's mainly a cruise ship problem is a bit misleading. It's more widespread than that. And we're probably more likely to encounter it closer to home rather.
Precisely. You might be surprised to learn that the CDC publishes a dirtiest cruise ships list, but it's based on general sanitation inspections, not specifically norovirus outbreaks. It's a good reminder that sanitation standards are important everywhere, not just on vacation.
That's a good point. It's definitely food for thought, especially as many of us are planning spring and summer vacations. So if most outbreaks aren't happening on cruise ships, where else are they popping up? Where should we be extra cautious?
Norovirus outbreaks can happen in a variety of settings, but some are more susceptible than others. Healthcare facilities, particularly long-term care facilities, are particularly vulnerable. You have a concentration of people in close contact, many of whom are already vulnerable due to age or underlying health conditions. And these outbreaks can be incredibly persistent. Some have been reported to last for months.
That's alarming. I hadn't realized that these outbreaks could linger for so long in those settings.
It really highlights the need for strict infection control measures in healthcare settings. Another common setting for outbreaks is restaurants and catered events. Food handling practices play a huge role here, and infected food workers, even those without symptoms, can easily spread the virus.
So it's not just about how thoroughly we wash our hands. It's also about ensuring that the people handling our food are following proper hygiene practices.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about schools and childcare centers. Kids are incredibly efficient at spreading germs, and the close proximity in these settings creates a perfect storm for norovirus transmission. The bottom line is, norovirus can strike anywhere, and we're all potentially at risk.
That's a sobering thought, but it's important to be aware of the risks so we can take appropriate precautions. Speaking of which, I noticed that several sources mentioned oysters as a common culprit in foodborne norovirus outbreaks. What's the deal with oysters and this virus? Is it just a matter of how they're prepared?
That's a great question. And it gets to the heart of how oysters feed. They're filter feeders, which means they constantly strain water to capture their food. Unfortunately, this filtering process also concentrates any contaminants present in the water, including norovirus. So even if oysters are lightly cooked, the virus might not be completely eliminated, posing a risk to consumers.
So even with proper cooking, there's still a risk due to the pre-existing contamination in the oyster itself.
Exactly. The FDA even issued a warning about contaminated oysters from Canada, highlighting the potential for widespread outbreaks from a single source.
That's certainly something to keep in mind the next time I'm at a raw bar. But it's important to remember that while oyster-related outbreaks make headlines, most norovirus transmission occurs through person-to-person contact, right?
That's absolutely correct. Direct contact with an infected person, especially through fecal matter, is the primary mode of transmission. And the virus can spread even before symptoms appear, making it even trickier to control.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about the doom and gloom of norovirus outbreaks, and it's starting to feel a bit heavy. Let's shift gears and talk about what we can actually do to protect ourselves from this nasty bug. There's no medication for norovirus, so prevention is key, right?
You hit the nail on the head. Since we can't just take a pill to cure norovirus, prevention is our best defense. And the good news is that there are simple, effective steps we can take to significantly reduce our risk.
Let's dive into those preventative measures. Several sources emphasize the importance of thorough hand washing. And we're not talking a quick rinse here. It needs to be a full 20-second scrub with soap and water, right?
Absolutely. That 20-second rule isn't just a suggestion. It's based on the time it takes to effectively remove those stubborn viral particles from your hands. As we mentioned earlier, hand sanitizers are not as reliable against norovirus, so soap and water are your best bet.
That's a myth busted. So we need to be diligent about hand washing, especially after using the restroom, before eating, and after being in public places. And it's not just about washing our own hands, but also about cleaning and disinfecting surfaces, particularly high-touch areas like doorknobs, light switches, and countertops. This is especially crucial after someone has been sick.
You're absolutely right. Regular cleaning and disinfecting with a bleach solution, or a disinfectant specifically registered as effective against norovirus, can significantly reduce the risk of transmission. And let's not forget about food safety. Washing produce thoroughly and cooking shellfish to the proper temperature are crucial steps in minimizing the risk of foodborne norovirus.
Sounds like attention to detail is really important here. We can't just assume that a quick wipe down is enough. We need to be thorough and use the right products to effectively target norovirus.
Exactly. And perhaps the most important tip of all, and one that often gets overlooked, is this. If you're sick, stay home. It may seem obvious, but it's crucial to avoid spreading the virus to others, especially if you work in a high-risk setting like a healthcare facility or a restaurant.
That's a simple act of consideration that can truly make a huge difference in preventing outbreaks. It's about taking personal responsibility for the well-being of our communities. We've covered a lot of ground here, from understanding what norovirus is and how it spreads, to the importance of preventative measures. But I'm sure you've got more insights to share.
I do. Let's shift our focus to a specific aspect of this season's surge. The emergence of that new norovirus strain, GII by 17 night. What makes this strain so different? And why is it causing such a dramatic increase in cases?
I'm all ears. What have the sources said about that?
Well, we usually see a peak in norovirus cases in January, but this year the surge started much earlier, back in December. This could be because GII.16 has some genetic quirks that make it more transmissible, compared to the strain that was dominant last year.
So this new strain is catching us off guard because our bodies haven't encountered anything quite like it before.
Exactly, and it really underscores the dynamic nature of viruses and why staying ahead of them is such a challenge. They're constantly evolving, which is why we need to be adaptable in our prevention and treatment strategies.
It's a reminder that we can't be complacent. Even with viruses we think we understand, what's old can become new again, especially in the world of viruses. Speaking of being prepared, we've talked a lot about preventing norovirus, but what happens when an outbreak occurs? What if I find myself in a situation where norovirus is spreading?
That's a crucial question. The Vermont Department of Health actually offered some excellent advice on outbreak management. If you suspect an outbreak in a setting like a school, childcare center, or long-term care facility, the first and most important step is to notify the health department immediately.
So don't try to handle it alone. Get the experts involved right away.
Exactly. Early reporting is key to containing an outbreak effectively. They also highlighted the importance of following specific cleaning and disinfecting protocols. It's not enough to just wipe things down with any household cleaner. You need a bleach solution or a disinfectant that's specifically registered as being effective against norovirus.
So it's all about using the right tools for the job.
And being thorough. Focus on high-touch surfaces, like doorknobs, light switches, elevator buttons, and countertops. Those are the areas where the virus is most likely to linger.
That makes sense. It's those everyday objects we often overlook that can harbor these tiny but potent viruses.
And while we're on the topic of thoroughness, let's not forget about laundry. Soiled items should be washed immediately in hot water with detergent, and then machine dried on the highest heat setting. And always wear gloves when handling contaminated laundry, just to be extra safe.
These are all incredibly practical tips, but they can make a real difference in preventing the spread of norovirus. And it's important to remember that this isn't just about protecting ourselves. It's about protecting those around us who might be more vulnerable to serious complications. It's about taking a collective approach to public health.
Absolutely. We have a shared responsibility to prevent outbreaks and minimize the impact of this virus on our communities.
So we've delved into the science of norovirus, the prevention strategies, and how to manage an outbreak IF1 occurs. What's the next layer we can peel back in this deep dive?
This might seem like a bit of a jump, but let's connect all this back to a theme that's woven through many of our sources, the crucial role of public health infrastructure.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the connection to norovirus?
Well, norovirus is a perfect example of why we need robust public health systems in place. We need the capacity for surveillance to track outbreaks as they emerge, sophisticated labs for testing and confirming diagnoses, and clear communication channels to disseminate timely and accurate information to the public. Without these elements, we're essentially flying blind.
It's about having the resources and expertise to respond effectively to these kinds of threats before they spiral out of control.
Precisely. And it's not just about reacting to outbreaks as they happen. It's about investing in research to develop better prevention and treatment strategies for the future. This includes ongoing surveillance to monitor for new strains, like GII.1 and research into potential antiviral drugs that could target norovirus directly.
And of course, there's the ongoing quest for a norovirus vaccine, which could be a game changer in our fight against this virus.
Exactly. And the vaccine would be incredibly valuable. But developing one for a virus with so many different strains and a knack for mutating rapidly presents a real challenge.
It's a tough nut to crack. But the potential benefits are so significant that research in this area needs to continue. It's about looking beyond our immediate needs and investing in long-term solutions.
I completely agree. And it's not just about vaccines. We need to continue exploring other innovative approaches to prevention and treatment, perhaps by looking at new sanitation technologies or exploring ways to enhance our natural immune defenses against norovirus. This is where creativity and collaboration across scientific disciplines become so important.
So this deep dive into norovirus has actually given us a glimpse into the broader challenges and opportunities in public health as a whole.
It really has. And it's important to acknowledge that we're living in an era of increasing global interconnectedness, which means that infectious diseases can spread more rapidly than ever before.
Which makes a strong and coordinated global public health infrastructure even more vital. We're all in this together, so to speak.
Exactly. We need to foster collaboration across borders, sharing information, resources, and expertise to effectively address these emerging threats. Norovirus might seem like a relatively localized problem, but it highlights the need for a global perspective on public health.
So norovirus is just one piece of a much larger and increasingly complex puzzle.
It is, and it's a powerful reminder that we're all connected in this fight against infectious diseases, both the familiar ones and those that are yet to emerge.
It's definitely given me a lot to think about. We've covered the science, the prevention, the outbreak management, and even the need for a robust public health infrastructure. It's been a fascinating journey. What else can we unpack in this deep dive?
Let's shift our focus to something we haven't touched upon yet, the economic impact of norovirus. It might not seem like a major concern.
It might not seem like a major concern, but I'm ready to be surprised.
Well, when you consider that millions of people are getting sick every year, the costs start to add up quickly. We're talking lost productivity from people missing work or school, healthcare costs associated with doctor visits and hospitalizations, not to mention the expenses related to cleaning and disinfecting to contain those outbreaks.
So it's not just the individual suffering we need to consider. There's a ripple effect that impacts the economy as a whole.
Exactly. One study estimated that norovirus cost the U.S. economy over $6 billion annually, and that's likely a conservative estimate. The true cost is probably much higher when you factor in things like the impact on the tourism industry. Imagine the revenue lost when a cruise ship has to cut a trip short or cancel bookings due to a norovirus outbreak.
Wow, $6 billion. That's a staggering figure. It really highlights the hidden costs of these outbreaks, costs that we don't often think about.
And it really underscores the need for greater investment in preventative measures. If we can reduce the number of norovirus cases, we can potentially save billions of dollars and improve overall health and well-being at the same time. It's a win-win situation.
It makes you realize that public health is intrinsically linked to economic stability. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive. The science, the prevention strategies, those persistent outbreaks, the economic impact, and even the need for a robust public health infrastructure. What's the key takeaway you want our listener to walk away with? What's the big picture message here?
I think the most important message is that while norovirus is a serious public health threat, it's one that we can control. We have the knowledge and the tools to effectively prevent and manage these outbreaks. It's all about individual responsibility, collective action, and a commitment to supporting public health initiatives.
So it starts with each of us being diligent about those simple BAT effective measures like washing our hands thoroughly and staying home when we're sick. But it also goes beyond those individual actions, right?
Absolutely. It's about advocating for better public health funding, supporting research into new vaccines and treatments, and promoting policies that prioritize sanitation and hygiene. It's a multifaceted challenge that requires a multifaceted approach.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's a reminder that even in our modern world, with all of our medical advancements, something as tiny as a virus can still disrupt our lives and have a significant impact on our health and our economy.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it? But it's also a call to action. We can't afford to be complacent. We need to be proactive, informed, and engaged in protecting ourselves and our communities.
I'm definitely feeling more informed.
Yeah.
And perhaps a bit more empowered to navigate this tricky virus and make choices that contribute to a healthier future. Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought. We've talked a lot about the need for a norovirus vaccine, but what if we aimed even higher? What if we challenged ourselves to develop a universal hygiene intervention, something that could effectively protect us from not just T norovirus, but a wide range of pathogens? It's a daunting challenge, no doubt. But imagine the possibilities. That's something to ponder as we move forward. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of norovirus. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay healthy.